Towards the end of the Giggle, the 14th Doctor has been hit with a Toymaker's laser and is about to regenerate. But instead of turning into the 15th Doctor, Donna and Mel pull the 15th Doctor's body from out of the 14th Doctor, and the two coexist from then on. But that's only part of the story. In the video commentary for the Giggle on the BBC website, Russell T Davies mentions that he considers the bad generation to have happened retroactively across every single time the Doctor regenerated, creating alternate timelines in which every Doctor carried on living. He suggests this can be used as a way to bring back previous Doctors without having to come up with some convoluted way of explaining why they look older now than they did when they regenerated. None of this is stated in the actual episode. For all I know, it may never be mentioned again, but it does open up a lot of possibilities for the future. Not to mention all the books, comics and audio stories that could be made using the same idea. So I thought I'd take a look back at the previous regenerations and see what might have happened in the timelines where the old Doctors just kept on going. The first Doctor basically died of old age, so it's hard to say how much longer a bad generated version could have carried on. But David Bradley could always play the character again, as he did most recently in Power of the Doctor, and it would certainly be interesting to see how he interacts with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor. It could also be argued that the character Richard Hurdle played in the Five Doctors could have been a bad-generated First Doctor, as he appeared to be retired during his first appearance, just casually walking through a garden centre. And it would certainly explain why he looks and acts differently to how he did before. There is more evidence for the second Doctor's bad generation, as it has been a fan theory for many years. The Big Finish audio Beyond War Games has the CIA, a secret organisation of Time Lords, saving the second Doctor after his trial and forcing him to work for them, with the threat that if he doesn't, then they will exile him to Earth and regenerate him. They claim to have pulled him out of the time stream right before his regeneration, but it would make more sense if it was a bi-generation. And it would also explain why he keeps getting cyclic flashes of his third incarnation, if the two are existing simultaneously. Of course, this was all done to explain why Patrick Troughton looks so different when he appears in the Five Doctors and then the Two Doctors. And for my money, it's as good an explanation as any. As for the third Doctor, John Pertwee looked pretty much the same throughout the last few decades of his life, so bad generation wouldn't make that much of a difference. I guess his appearance in Dimensions in Time might count, although that barely counts as canon anyway. Tom Baker has a few later life appearances that could be argued to be a bad-generated Fourth Doctor. There's an audio series, Hornet's Nest, where he's retired and living with a housekeeper called Mrs. Whimsy. I think this does technically take place at some indeterminate time during the Fourth Doctor's era, but he does sound a lot older in those audios, so they make a lot more sense if you imagine that's an older version of the character. As far as on-screen appearances go, his appearance in Dimensions in Time could easily be a bi-generation, and of course the Curator at the end of Day of the Doctor. He claims to be a later incarnation of the Doctor who's just gone back to an old face, but he could just as easily be lying and be a bi-generated Fourth Doctor instead. The Fifth Doctor's appearance in Time Crash is clearly a lot older than when he regenerated. There is some technobabble to explain why, but a bi-generation would certainly be a similar explanation. And when he appears in Tales of the TARDIS, he's even older, with even less explanation. Similarly, another episode of Tales from the TARDIS has an older version of the Sixth Doctor, again looking much older and again with no explanation. But finally, in the Seventh Doctor's episode, he does basically state that he's from an alternate timeline where he never regenerated. And you can extrapolate from that the Fifth and Sixth Doctor's appearance in the same series were also from different timelines. So that's a bi-generation basically confirmed. The Eighth Doctor only filmed his regeneration 10 years ago, so a bi-generated version wouldn't look that much different. No doubt Big Finish will cover it at some point. They work with Paul McGann every chance they get. So no doubt they'll do a box set someday where the Eighth Doctor fights the Time War instead of regenerating into the War Doctor. The Ninth Doctor is extremely unlikely to ever get a bad generation, as Christopher Eccleston has stated that he has no intention of going back to the show as long as Russell T Davies is in charge, and the BBC have no intention of letting Russell T Davies go, because they don't have anyone good enough to take over. So it's a bit of a stalemate there. But maybe Eccleston could play a bad-generated version of his Doctor in the audio series, which would also allow him to work with Billy Piper again. The 10th Doctor has already arguably had one bad generation, as the human version of himself that split off and was left behind with Rose was really an early version of the same concept. It is a bit odd that we still haven't seen that version of the Doctor and Rose again, although that could suggest that we won't be seeing the 14th Doctor and Donna again in the near future either. The 11th Doctor basically needed a whole new set of regenerations in order to regenerate, so I'm not sure if the bad generation concept applies in his case. But he did live to a ripe old age on Trenzalore, so if they ever want to bring back Matt Smith at any point in his lifetime, they could always have the current Doctor land on Trenzalore and help 75-year-old Matt Smith fight the Cybermen or whoever. As for the 12th Doctor, it's probably a bit too soon to imagine what he may have turned into, but an older version of the 13th Doctor would be interesting to see. 20 or 30 years from now, Jodie Whittaker could come back, playing the Doctor as a batty old lady, and she may be better received in that version than she was in her first stint. Well, that's all I have to say about that. Subscribe to see more Doctor Who videos, and less successful videos or other subjects. And check out the description for a link to the playlist of my reviews for all this year's anniversary specials. See you next time.